This is the Business Stuff Podcast. This is where I will share the lessons I've learned from advising thousands of businesses over almost 30 years. Each episode will give you practical insight to allow you to learn from other people's mistakes. I'll be pulling in experts from our team and the world of business, and together we'll make sure your business is giving you what you want. My name is Martin, and this is the Business Stuff Podcast. So I'm here with Clare and Clare from Venture Zero, and we're here to talk about being consciously connected, how you can get your business aligned with your people and all of these things. Do you want to just give us a quick intro into who you are, what you do?
Yeah, well, we're Clare and Clare, so that's easy enough to remember. We're from Venture Zero, and we set the company up really with the idea that we want to bring together my background's in sustainability, Claire's background's in mental health, and we really want to get to people to recognise that there's a synergy between those two, and how we can drive that through people's businesses when they're looking at things like their net zero plans and their carbon footprints, but also when they're looking at like their wellbeing strategies. There's a real bit in the middle that we want people to think about and how they're going to get their people to consciously connect with that process.
Okay, can you add anything to that, Claire? Or
I think that was a
pretty
good summary, yeah.
Okay, we'll let the viewers decide who did it best, because you didn't add anything there either, Claire. So okay then, and we met as two businesses because we're a B Corp. We're trying to reduce, our impact. We're trying to improve the way we look after our people in the community, those types of things. Mm-hmm. We've got 100 people. Not everyone is on all the time. Like, we still find cans in the bin now and again. And you're like, oh, is that why this is kind of came around? You can see that people are trying to do things, but they can't necessarily get everyone to follow the same vision. Is that
I think there's a lot needs to be done within organisations to take staff and employees along the journey. We quite often go into organisations and they'll maybe have done a climate policy or a sustainability strategy. They might have a wellbeing strategy, but what they've not done as part of that process is, like I say, taking staff along the journey, so they've not engaged with them and got their kind of, made sure that their values align, and they've not necessarily done the right training around it as well. So that's something that we do a lot of, kind of training and workshops around kind of carbon literacy, which is something that I do, mental health first aid, which is something that Claire does, and then we've got another workshop called Climate Connections, which is where we really get people to sit down and look at, right, how can you make steps to maybe reduce your environmental or your carbon footprint, as we call it, but also improve your well-being along the way. Yeah,
because Claire, there's, I was trying to come up with the term and you came up with it, eco-anxiety. A lot of people are, almost in a frenzy sometimes over this.
Absolutely.
Possibly feeling powerless to change because, I'm a believer that it has to happen at the big business is probably the easiest way to crack this. If you can get big business to get on board, it's easier, isn't it? What's the link here? Why does eco-anxiety even exist?
So I think first thing I would love to say, I did come up with the term eco-anxiety. I did today.
No, you suggested it to me. Sorry,
but
yes.
Just kind of don't want people thinking that was my thing.
Yeah. Mine was less publishable. Yeah, you couldn't have published what I thought.
But eco-anxiety is a term that's been coined now, and it is this sense of overwhelm about the environment, about people feeling like they have to be doing something, they have to be doing more, they're not doing enough. People are really fearful about the future, and the statistics are quite frightening around it. And I think it is, and hopefully I get this right, 75% I think of adults in the UK say that the future is frightening.
Right.
Particularly related to the environment.
I was going to say, and that's not that they're worried about losing their job, or it's an environmental.
It's a combination, but environment will have a huge impact on that. If we look at young people, so up to the age of about 25, that statistic is very clearly related to concerns about the environment and about the impact. Okay. So actually what we're hearing people tell us, and when we do our workshops, it never ceases to amaze me how overwhelmed people actually are. Yeah. People are literally having sleepless nights, worrying about the future. People are making life-changing decisions, young people deciding whether or not they want to have children based on their fear of the future around the planet. So it's a big issue.
But it's strange, isn't it? Because underpopulation is actually, China's going to be struggling because it had the one-child policy for so long. They're not going to have enough young people. So their population's going the wrong way, the other way. which has its own issues anyway. That's just as worrying. You know, who's going to look after everyone?
Yeah.
That sounds selfish, but
I think there's a lot of layers to the fallout of this anxiety that people are experiencing, and I think we're finding people just feeling genuinely overwhelmed. And at the minute we've got, you know, the cost of living crisis as well, so people are now concerned even more than ever about energy.
Yeah.
So that their priorities are kind of, I need to figure out how to feed my family, but I also have this overwhelming fear of I'm not doing enough for the environment.
Yeah.
And
do you think it's a fair pressure to put it like?
Yeah.
Not whether people should feel this pressure, but do you think we've got? I don't know. Do you think we get the balance right in saying, look, you've got to solve this? Because I'm not sure how much individuals can actually solve these things.
So that's a perfect question for us.
Yeah.
It's a perfect comment because that's exactly what we are about.
Because I read something recently, whether it's true or not, I read an article about how I think it was Shell who came up with carbon footprint, almost to like pass it to you. Well, Shell don't need to do it, you need. Yeah, or did they? Allegedly.
But
we're trying not to get sued on the podcast.
This notion that people are feeling really, really overwhelmed and haven't got a clue where to start and are having these sleepless nights is very real, but there are so many small, really amazing things that we can do for ourselves.
Oh yeah, I'm not denying that people might feel this overwhelm. I'm just wondering whether they're taking it on more than they should.
Yeah. There's a lot of studies that have been done in the last kind of 2 years that go to show now, and there's a great one by an organisation called Project Drawdown, which has literally come up with about 101 climate solutions. And this is ranging from across the board, from like individual action right up through to what big corporates should be doing. But there's a piece of work there that goes to show there are impactful steps that we should be taking in our everyday life that will really, really have a big impact.
Right.
And that actually as individuals we do have a part to play.
And
that's, when you said before about, you know, big businesses should be doing more, totally big businesses should be doing more, but we waited a long time for governments and large corporate organisations to really do something about this. We haven't got time to wait any longer for them to get on board. So they're really, and we always say in our training, it needs to be a top-down, bottom-up approach. Like if you're looking at it from an organisational perspective, you very much need your directors, your CEOs need to be on board with this, but you also need the people that are the cogs of your business to also be on board with it.
Because the classic, you know, response, without trying to label people, but you know, like the deniers will say, well, it doesn't matter what we do, China burns more panda bears than I've ever seen, and be like, you know, whatever. But if you actually look at the proportion per person, you know, the West is still per person
considerably lower per carbon footprint per person. Because
it's all basically on one end of the country. You know, like most of China still basically has no electricity and burns enough to like cook a pot of whatever they cook, you know. Do you think it's fair for the West to kind of say, well, you can't have all the fridges and cars now that we've had for the last 50 years, and also at the same time saying, but you've got all, you know, we're going to give them up now? Is this part of why people are so conflicted and refuse to buy in?
Well, climate justice and that social justice is a huge part of it, isn't it? And we had some interesting conversations on a training course recently about, where does that responsibility lie, and who is, you know, you're exactly right. Is it fair to be able to say to developing nations now, no, you can't have the access to the same, you know, same thing
infrastructure?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
That's a real hot political conversation, really, isn't it, to be had? Definitely.
But I think also if we go back to the anxiety that people are feeling, we know that, you know, working in the field of mental health for many, many years, what we know is if anxiety is driven by fear.
Yeah.
So it's fear of something, usually of the unknown actually, or a potential threat. We know that this is actually a real threat. Yeah. And also we know that what...
Is the unknown bit how to solve it then?
I think the unknown bit is because there's that scepticism there as well, because it's kind of, we're being told this, but is that really the case?
So on one hand it's like, but whose agenda?
But then also the unknown, like, I don't know what to do about this, is what people are saying. And we know actually what helps anxiety is for people to feel a little bit more in control of that. And so if we sit back and we just wait for the big cats to do something, our anxiety is going to fester even more. Whereas actually,
I love that, the big cats. Are these cats fat or thin by any chance?
The big fat cats.
Fat, are they? Right, okay.
But I just think if people can feel like they have some element of control over the situation, then that can help to reduce and ease the anxiety. So I think for that reason as well, it's really important that everybody just recognises that there are these small steps that don't have to be life-changing. They don't have to be...
They don't have to ruin your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, they're things that can be quite exciting and new, that you've not tried before, that you can get your kids involved with, that you can get your teams involved with.
You haven't met my kids. I can tell you they're not going to get them. I'm joking.
I bet your kids could probably teach you about the carbon neutral situation, because kids are so informed.
You'll have to teach them where the light switch is first. Listen, I'm a dad. They don't know how your light works.
Like
turn the light off. Turn the light off. Blackpool illumination. I don't know if everyone said that.
But I think that helps with the to manage how people are feeling about it, to be educated and understand that.
So the unknown as well, is it, are we being played? It's the cats putting it on us and they're not doing it. There's the unknown about what actions you can actually take. And I suppose we're here really that, the idea of being consciously connected as a business with your team is to try and have a unified voice and agreement on what we're going to do together. Where do we start there then, other Claire?
As in getting people engaged?
Yeah, so let's say you head up a business and you've got a team and you think, well, I really agree with this, I want to do something, but you've just got people just merrily burning plastic on it, I don't know, like,
not doing it.
How can I persuade these?
It is educating people. There's a lot of companies now that we are seeing, say measure their carbon footprint and then make steps to reduce it, which is great, and that very much needs doing. But as I said before, it's about getting that engagement kind of across the board, and really getting people to understand that those small steps that Claire mentioned really can make a difference, and they don't have to be life changing. Just thinking about maybe walking more instead of jumping in the car, thinking about what you're eating, just thinking about maybe what you're buying. Do you need to buy all the do we need to consume things in the way that we have done in the past? And all those steps can make a massive difference. People get very bogged down when I talk to organisations about, and I've had a similar conversation here about, well, people just aren't recycling properly, and it's a great hook for getting people talking, because we're very emotive in the UK about our waste and our recycling, but we are not going to recycle our way out of this situation.
Because recycling isn't even as good as reusing, is it?
No, exactly, it's not.
Upcycling's better than recycling.
Yeah. It's kind of looking at those steps on the waste hierarchy.
Don't recycle a plastic bottle. Don't have it,
Exactly, don't use it in the first place.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things, because like I said, people go down that recycling, oh well, I'm already doing my bit, but I think a lot of people don't realise other things that can make a difference. Yeah. And I think that's been a journey for me as well.
Because again, recycling's just that's one aspect of this, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've mentioned travel. What else is there in Clare?
Well, food. I'm learning much more about food as I go along. Right. I love food.
There's a great infographic. I don't know if we can share stuff like that.
I'll just breathe in. I can take or leave food.
I just think different. Learn about foods and the importance of eating in season, and the importance of where your food comes from and how it's transported and stuff. That's been a massive learning curve for me, because I learn from Clare all the time.
There's often a conflict with people saying, you should eat more avocado. Oh no, the avocados are like killing wildlife. And
avocados is it? Yeah.
Avocados is a conversation we often have, because I love avocado.
It's also stopping these young kids buying houses. If they just stopped eating avocado, they could buy a house.
Avocado our way out of this one.
But
just be more conscious. It's that thing. Let's just be a bit more conscious about the choices we make, the things that we do, and reflect on everything and say, actually, just pause for a second and say, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my carbon footprint? And just being more connected with things.
We've really become very disconnected from nature as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's possibly one of the things that has come out of the pandemic, that people, because we had that period of time where you could only really get out and walk, and maybe if you were lucky enough, like we obviously live on the coast, so we're very lucky to be able to get out into an amazing space, but people started to realise that actually there's a lot of solutions on their doorstep in terms of making them feel better. Get out and have some fresh air, look at some nice scenery, and just kind of really appreciate what we've got. And it sounds perhaps a little bit cliched, but the evidence around kind of the impact that blue and green spaces can have on our mental health is quite astounding, really.
most people can guess what a green space. What's a blue space?
I like water. Basically.
Right,
So the sea, reservoirs, lakes.
Just access to that water environment.
We're talking about, being consciously connected. Does that connection give people a better understanding? I stood behind two of our nation's future leaders at Tesco once, debating how they get potato into mashed potato. When you've got that kind of level of kind of knowledge about the basic foods like that, expecting people to buy the local in-season thing it's an uphill battle, isn't it?
So maybe that's not their hook. And that's what we talk about quite a lot in the work that we do. Everybody's got their different hook. For some people, it's going to be food. For some, it's going to be travel. For some, it's going to be saving money. Yeah. So
because that's topical as well, and I think we need to come back to that.
So I think it's about actually, we're not all going to make every change that we possibly can, but what resonates with us. And I talk about instant gratification quite a lot. I quite like instant gratification. We've got a sister podcast that is the gratification podcast.
So I think you can keep that off the air.
For some people, it's kind of, if I do this, it's going to make me feel good now, or I can see that change.
Because a lot of these things are like, we're playing a long game.
Yeah.
Well, a medium game.
And that's hard to see.
Yeah.
It's hard to visualise.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay if you can't. So just what is the hook for each person? It might not be food for those people who don't have
Does smart meter is a way to gamify this, isn't it? I spent £8 yesterday, I'm going to get it out to 7 tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, if that's a form of instant gratification.
Well, going on energy, I guess it's the key there is knowing your energy use, kind of almost doing like an audit of your energy consumption, be that as a business or as an individual. Smart meters definitely one of the ways to kind of go about that. And then you're in competition with yourself, I guess, at home. Like, well, I used that yesterday, but I reckon I can reduce that today.
We talked about this just literally before. We just sat and had a cup of tea before we came in here, and this conversation came up about the energy and smart meters and things. And one of the things that we talk about quite a lot with business is a good place to start for people is something called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, which is a very well-known kind of structure. NHS use it. We use it a lot in mental health services when I worked there as well. And it's a nice start because we know the evidence around the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, which is to connect, to learn, to be active, take notice, and to give. Okay. So those are the 5 pillars. The research tells us that if we engage in something that ticks those boxes, preferably on a daily basis, that it very clearly enhances our sense of well-being.
Right.
And that's a nice place to start with environmental issues as well. So with the smart meters, for example, we were kind of saying one of those things is to learn. So educate yourself about how much energy are you using, what can I do about that, connect with someone else and have that conversation and educate them about that as well.
And actually I was saying before about the kids with light switches, but they love gaming. So again, gamification. Well, all right, kids, would save as much as we can. Let's
getting the whole family involved is a great way.
Reuse the money you save to do something to incentivise people to do it. I don't know.
And also we know
that last summer, and this wasn't. I mean, I've said we can't recycle our way out of this, which we can't. But actually, I did something with my kids last summer.
I love this.
For Plastic-Free July. So basically we put a separate container aside in the kitchen, put all the plastic that we'd used over the month in there, and then literally at the end of the month tipped it all out in the garden and basically did a plastic audit, which obviously sounds incredibly dull and boring, but they absolutely loved it. Got really involved, and I kind of went through how many crisp packets have we got on?
Milk cartons.
And then it kind of started a whole, they're only 6 and 11, but my 11-year-old actually decided to, off the back of that, to write to Cadbury's and say, why is all your chocolate in plastic packaging? But it sparked a whole thing off in them.
Yeah. And actually, that might be a way. That might be one of the smaller things that we can do that will influence the cats. Because if we stop doing and stop buying and stop supporting behaviour that doesn't fit with what you want, that will. Because these businesses are shareholders, they're there for profit primarily. If we can show that actually it's not good business, that is one way you can do it, isn't it?
And I think
we are seeing, a huge shift in. I mean, just take the the food again. The amount of the population now that are either vegetarian or vegan, I can't remember the statistic, but it's pretty high, or at least the number of people that have drastically reduced the amount of meat they eat. Yeah. And the industry has responded.
I presume at the same time, the quality of meat more people are presumably eating free range, corn fed rather than mass produced.
So
it's like a double shift, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's an affordability.
I realise there, but there's a peeling off of two groups here, and the group in the middle eating the badly produced, low quality, which is unfortunately a lot of the food, which is a different conversation. I think that is a reducing amount, isn't it?
Yes, and they're bringing in. There's not. So food labelling in terms of the environmental impact of food it's not a mandatory requirement yet. They're actually bringing it in France, and I don't know why.
Is this like a traffic light? So it's
good.
So
basically, but there's an organisation called Foundation Earth, which is an NGO they're doing a big study at the moment and looking at whether they can put on packaging the carbon footprint, the water impact, the biodiversity impact, so the whole plethora of information, so that as consumers you can make a much better informed choice.
I don't know if it's true, but that kind of thing's going to be tricky because a British apple in season is a low impact, but a British apple a month before season has probably been stored somewhere for a year, chilled, and is now might not be as good as the French apple in the right season. So it's probably a complex area, but it feels like something like that needs to happen.
It is. I think
it?
people are always. You just kind of people. I think food shopping is probably a really, for a lot of people who are time poor, you're just kind of throwing things in your trolley. You're not perhaps taking the time to stop and look at actually where has your food come from? Is it in season? Has it been flown? Has it been grown? Has it been hot housed to grow it out of season, etc. And all that kind of stuff that people. I think a lot of people want to make an informed decision, but the information isn't there for them.
Because again, a locally produced tomato that's been blasted with heat and grown quicker than it should.
Yes.
Isn't as good as a locally produced, naturally
you're better
slow
off buying
growing
tomatoes from Spain because their growing season, if it, is longer than ours.
Yeah. So I mean, you can see why people have this fear.
Yeah.
But it
just goes round. Yeah.
So is it the individual's responsibility to try and educate themselves then,
I think it's a bit of both.
Bit of both.
I think it's a bit of both. I think if we bring it back to kind of the business case for it as well, it's about if people want to invest, if employers want to invest in their people, they have to take notice of what people value.
Yeah.
And people at the minute are wanting to understand more about this, and they want it to be made as easy as possible for them. So actually, if employers can provide opportunity for people to develop their understanding around this, to apply it at home and at work, that's what people want. And we also know that anybody who takes action on anything, if it aligns with their own values, it's going to have a far more successful outcome. And we know that these are the two big topics. People want to know, what are you doing, in terms of your environmental impact, and are you going to look after my well-being if I work for you? And people are much more likely to take, if we're talking about recruitment and retention even, these are the two big things that people are looking at. So if businesses don't invest in those things, they're going to lose their people, and they're going to go and find a business who are doing it.
Like the producers who don't do things in a good way, they'll lose their consumers eventually. Are you saying that will happen to employees and employers?
It is happening.
Yeah. There's some quite astounding statistics, isn't there, around kind of, particularly I think from the young,
millennials as well. So that's that's up to 40, which always scares me, because I think if you say millennial, you think like they're really young, but actually they're 40.
That is young.
He's compared
to 40. Wee bairns.
Yeah, but actually in that age group, significantly more are saying that they would much rather take a lower paid position, a lower paid job with a company who had strong environmental and wellbeing credentials than work for a company who were going to pay them more and didn't have that.
And is that, so they say that, do they then live their values though?
Yes, young people are.
Because if you look at, it's a crude measurement, but how many followers has, Greta Thunberg got on Insta versus Kim Kardashian?
Yeah. Kim's
probably got like 80 times the followers, and they've got people renting sets to pretend they're in private planes and that. So, it's like, well, they might say that, but are they living that in the same way or not?
I think many are.
Again, devil's advocate. I don't know the answer.
I don't know the statistics around that, but I know that every piece of research you look at is given the same answer. Yeah. That's what young people are telling us. So I think the fact that they're saying it and they're verbalising it actually means that employers need to think, okay.
Or they're saying it whilst flying to Thailand, though. Well, that's my point.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting piece of work there, isn't there? And there's a lot of... there is studies I think that's been done, isn't it? Are people, and this isn't just I think in the environmental sector, in lots of like political as well. People
say the right thing,
on one hand, but then their social media accounts may say something else. I think isn't there? I'm sure there's. I don't know if I've watched a programme recently about
it's lying.
Alignment.
It's lying, yeah. It's just lying, Claire. It's as old as time. So, no, I mean, because again, that's one of the things. It's like, oh, you're telling me not to drive to work, but I've never been to Thailand. Mm-hmm. So my short commute, you know, you've done worse than that. I don't know whether you've been to Thailand, sorry, Claire, but I don't care. Don't answer. But, you know, again, this is part of why I think some of the obstacles that are put in by people, aren't there? And so working with employers, it's, you know, because to some degree in employment, you have an element where if you're someone's employer, you can just tell them what to do. But that isn't necessarily the approach here, is it?
It's not going to get the best out of your people.
Yeah.
No, and one thing
even if you're telling them to do something right.
Yeah, one thing I would advocate is, one thing that we do in our training is get people to measure their own personal carbon footprint, because there's loads of applications out there that do it, so that you can get that figure. And then you can start to look at the ways that you can reduce it. Yeah. And I mean, it's a pretty rudimentary, crude figure. Depending on which app you use, you might get very different ones. But the figure itself isn't important. What is important is that you recognise that you've got one, and that actually by taking, you know, maybe one less car journey or eating one less, meat-based meal a week, it will have an impact. And you'll find,
because whichever app you pull, someone's going to go, but that's rubbish, because what you're talking about here is the trend, aren't you?
Yeah.
So if you badly measure something the same way and you get a different answer, you've still reduced it. Yeah. Even if it was flawed, you've still reduced it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap up then, you know, you've mentioned there's loads of great tips and there's 101. Give us your most obvious two, and then we'll come to you, Claire, for your kind of closing thing that you think people should be up to.
Well, I think for me, the obvious two are probably, if you're kind of thinking about the current energy crisis, it's get to know where your energy use within the home, because that's going to have the impact of reducing your bills, hopefully, and also getting your carbon footprint down. And then probably the second one is food. Not necessarily even looking at maybe, you know, if you're an avid meat eater, that's fine. But food waste, which is actually something we've not talked about, but that's a huge issue. So
because you can be a meat eater, but don't buy the whole chicken and throw half it out.
Exactly. That again comes back to money. You can, you know, there's I think the average family wastes about £750 a year on food they've thrown away, and of that about £450 has never even made it onto the plate. So again, you've got two things. It's not
you didn't cook too much and never even made it in the pan.
Bags of salad that have been kind of, you know, shoved at the bottom and forgotten about, and they all start to add up. But those two things, by their very nature, will.
I mean, there's like a triple whammy there, isn't there? Someone's had to grow the thing, and you've wasted it. It was plastic packaging anyway, and then it was transported to you.
But getting a handle on both of those things, even if the kind of environmental concerns are not high on your list of priorities,
they'll save you money if nothing else, won't they?
Probably is. So then you've got a win-win situation.
Because money talks after all, doesn't it? I like as well, Claire, because you know what's interesting is one of the things I don't think we're talking about enough is if we all just use a bit less power, there won't be as much demand for it. And pricing is supply and demand.
Yes.
You know, if we all just turn our boilers off for a couple of weeks, it might not be as practical as that, but actually, we need to adjust the price to get people to turn the boilers back on. So it's quite simple, isn't it?
This is a statistic, I only found this out a couple of months ago. £68 million a year is wasted in overfilled kettles.
I've started doing that. I've known it for years, and anyway, you don't need to hear my indulge in it.
But it does mean sometimes you only get half a cup of tea if you've not.
And then you got to put the damn thing back on and wait another 2 minutes. What about you then, Claire? What would you give us?
I would say be mindful of what your priorities are. So actually look at how you can make some changes that fit with your values and what makes you feel good, because that'll have a positive impact on your mental health as well as a positive impact on the planet.
And is that the gratification point then? It needs to feel like you've done something?
I think for me personally, I like that, but I just think it's generally, you know, somebody says the money bit maybe is more of a concern than something else. So go down that route. How can I kind of look at those areas, reduce my outgoings.
If you've got spare money though, that might not appeal.
That might not appeal, yeah. So actually, is it something that I can do? I really want to get my children involved in this. So what could I do with that? Or it might be that somebody has some health issues, physical, mental health issues.
Yeah.
Actually look at, well, what could really improve that at the same time as improving the planet? And one of the more common things is to get a bit of exercise,
walking instead of the car.
Because then we're going to be outside.
There's a classic video of there's a picture of an escalator going into a gym in America, and like, why is there an escalator outside the gym?
Yeah.
Like, you're not there to
things like getting outside, so that you are connecting again with the outdoors. And when you are being outside and you're connecting, you're then taking notice of things that might need a change. And then you might think, oh, well, I could go and get involved in that. Or I don't walk enough, I'm going to go for a walk, and while I go, I might pick a bit of litter on my way.
We did plastic-free July as well with the kids, and without sounding too hippie-ish, because you sounded a bit hippie-ish there, and I'm conscious you might lose our hardcore, like plastic users. But what was quite interesting is when you do walk somewhere, you realise just how much stuff is lying around. I mean, my commute is I walk up and down this road, and I get to that bin at the top of the road most nights, and I've got like 6 Budweiser bottles, 2 Starbucks cups, a McDonald's bag, and like God knows how many cans. And you think, it's like you wouldn't. The drivers, they might see it, but they don't get out and do anything.
Yeah.
And you don't realise quite how much stuff there is.
But if everybody just did that for on their commute, or just spent a minute walking, having a look and picking a bit up, people might think, well, why should I pick other people's litter up? But why not? If it's there... It's
your street as well, isn't it? Yeah, it's still your street, your park.
And actually it gets...
It normalises.
It normalises, yeah, but I think it kind of, it rouses other attention. It's, oh, you did that, okay, that's a good idea, and I'm going to do that.
That's something we haven't mentioned, is that ripple effect,
actually,
which is key, especially, personally and, I guess, in the workplace environment. But if you make a change, let's say, for example, you've got somebody who drives into the office every single day of the week, Monday to Friday, they've never thought about coming in any other means. But then they think, actually, no, one day a week I might try it. And then it sparks somebody else going, oh, well, they're doing that. And actually, they've said that actually it's great because they get to sit on the metro or the bus or whatever and have a cup of coffee and read the paper for 10-15 minutes, which they wouldn't have been able to do in the car. And it's that ripple effect that a change that you might have made, no matter how small, then makes other people go, oh, okay.
So this all feeds quite nicely, because we've got people here who do drive to work, but they'll drop 2 kids at 2 different places and then have to get here from somewhere where there isn't great transport in the first place. I'm very aware that I'm thinking of one person in particular who feels like, well, what can I do instead?
Yeah.
And that's why you've got to find your own thing.
Find your own thing.
Yeah, because it's not about telling people what they should be doing, because that's not going to get people on that journey. We shouldn't be mandating people to do anything. It should be about
offering an alternative.
Yeah. So actually, all right, you can't do that. It doesn't work for you, but maybe there are other things that you can consider.
Because otherwise, you're just going to drive people into even worse eco-anxiety. It's like as they're driving into work, thinking, "Why am I? This is awful."
Feeling guilty about that.
Yeah, but if you haven't really got much option, but at least don't use as much plastic then.
Yes.
Eat differently.
Do something else.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much,
Claire
and Claire.
Thank you.
From Venture Zero. I hope our viewers have found that of use. Remember, the business case here is 2 times, twice as... We didn't cover this. Happier, what was it?
Businesses are twice as likely to be financially successful if they invest in the health of their people.
Yeah. James might need to do a little bit of editing to put that at the start to get people to actually listen to the rest. So twice as likely to succeed if you've got,
Twice as likely to financially succeed if they invest in the health of their people.
Yeah. Excellent. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much.